Hi, my name is Rita Fischel and I'm here to explain to you today how to use the Creative Grids Angle Finder ruler. The Creative Grids Angle Finder ruler has been designed to help you do accurate miters on just about any angle of binding that you're going to put on. The first thing you'll do is you'll make your binding, and to do that you do it any way that you prefer. It can be any width that you choose, and it could be straight grain or it could be bias. After you've made your binding, you leave yourself a tail and you start sewing about 1/4 inch from the end of your fabric. You sew along the side, the edge here, and you stop about 1/4 inch from the end of your quilt. Then you butt the next side up to where you stopped sewing and you start again and again stop at 1/4 inch. Each time you're leaving a tail and you're starting with a tail. Once you've done that, the first thing you want to do is find the halfway mark of your binding. You need to bring your fabric up. I like to bring the fold just past the stitching line and make a little thumb crease there to show me the actual halfway line where my binding will be folded when I'm ready to finish it off. The next thing I need to do is, using my 90-degree angle, I lay it on my stitching line, I bring it right up to where my sewing stopped, and I draw this little deck that I'll build my angle on. Now I need to find out what the angle is that I'm binding. So I lay my ruler along the raw edge of my quilt, and I discover in this case it's a 135-degree angle. There's a solid line under the 135-degree angle, and there's a dotted line that comes right up through it. To use this, you're going to lay this on your binding. You lay the solid line right on that little deck that you drew, and you put the dotted line right in the ditch that you folded. And now you're going to mark the actual angle. It's like a little rooftop of the angle that you are binding. After you get the marking done, you put your two binding pieces together and you'll stitch on that little rooftop. Once you do the stitching, you trim away the extra seam allowance, and then when you're done and you turn it to the back, you can see that there's a nice neat miter on both the front and the back. Besides doing the odd-shaped angles, it also is great for doing a regular 90-degree angle. You do the same thing. You start about 1/4 inch from the end, leaving a tail, and you take it to the next corner. And when you've come all the way around, again, you stop where you started before and you leave a tail. Now this would be a regular rectangle or square quilt. You're still going to do the same thing. You find the center of your binding by folding it just past the stitching line and make yourself that little crease. And then using the 90-degree, you're going to draw your little deck. I'm lining it up with my stitching line, taking it up to where I stopped sewing, and drawing my little 90-degree angle off of my stitching. Now this time I'm actually going to bind a 90-degree angle, so I'm going to use this same angle. There's the solid line that will lay on my little deck that I drew, and there's the dotted line that will lay in the ditch, just like this. When I put my pieces together and I stitch them and I turn them, I end up with a perfect miter around a 90-degree angle. This is perfect if you're doing things that are bulky, like wool or fleece, or a heavy flannel. And as you can see here, it's also perfect if you're doing a quilt that has multiple colors around on the binding around the edge of the quilt. It's perfect for a little kid's bright cherry quilt where you want a different color on each side. And there's one more thing that this will do, the dreaded inside angle. You're going to approach it in the same manner. You make your binding, you sew it on, you stop 1/4 inch below the actual V, and you leave a little tail. Then as you come up the other side, leaving a tail, you stitch along just as before. Now you're going to continue to do the same process as we've been doing. You fold this in half, you bring it just past the stitching line that finds your center. Then I'm going to use that 90-degree angle again, lay it right along my stitching, and draw my little deck. Now I need to find out what this angle is that I want to bind. So when I lay my ruler along the edge, I can see that we're still working with that 135-degree angle. And once again, the solid line lays on the deck and the dotted line lays in the ditch. But this time, since we're doing an inside angle, I'm going to turn it and point to the inside, just the same, just exactly opposite of what we were doing before. Now I'm going to draw my little rooftop pointing into the binding rather than into the seam allowance, and when I put these together and I get my quilt and my seam allowance out of the way and I stitch that rooftop, I have an inside angle, if you can see that, and when I trim away my seam allowance, I like to clip right into the V of that inside angle, and then when you're done you simply turn it to the back and it's mitered on the front and the back, and it's perfect for the angle that you're just binding.